Well, happy Monday. It's July 8th. Want to bring you the latest data here in the Austin metro area. We're going to start looking at June statistics. Now that we've got some of the latest data there, we're going to look at inventory levels. We're going to look at the median price trends, and we'll wrap it up with interest rates. Wanted to start with this chart right here. This is looking at the last 5 years of sold data, not price, but sold units. We are the red line, and look how hard it's dropped off in June. That means we probably peaked out in the number of closed sales in May. And now we're seeing it kind of ride down. I think we will, that little dot might bump up a little bit as we get maybe some final pendings closed from June in the MLS if agents are a little late to get that data in there, but it's not going to go all the way back up to May. It's going to stay low. This blue line above it is 2023. We're following a very similar trend, peaking out a little early in May, and as rates went up, it put downward pressure on buyers. This might get a little bounce if rates start to soften or come down later this year, but I don't expect we're going to get up to the number of closed sales that we saw in May. So I think we can say, unless something crazy happens, we have already peaked out on sales in terms of number of closed sales in a month in May of this year. If we look at June, units sold was down almost 23%, and that's what you're seeing on that chart. The average sales price was down about 3.6%. Days on market was up a little bit from June of last year, and the median price was down about 4.7%. So again, a little higher interest rates, fewer sales, and sellers are having to capitulate a little bit more to get those buyers to the finish line. If we look at the last week of June, this is June 23rd through the 29th. And again, that's a small little sample. But again, it gives you some flavors. So new listings, we were up. So more sellers selling, but sold listings was down almost 25%. Months of inventory at its highest level, 5.3%. Median sales price, again, about $438 in the market. And 15.6% of active listings had to do a price drop in that 1 week. So typically in a month right now, we're seeing almost 50% of the inventory do a price reduction. Why? That's the number one weapon that sellers have to adjust the conversation and get buyers to come look at their property. There's lots of other things we can do, but obviously price is that big weapon that can try to spur buyer activity into that property and get them to write offers. So if we look down here, this is year to date. This is January 1st through June 30th. So if you put it all together, the first 6 months of 2023 and the first 6 months of 2024, total sales this year were down about 3.5%. The average sales price is hanging in there. It's only about 0.5%. So we're really not that far off from last year. Days on market up about 5 days. So, within a week of what we were doing last year, a little slower because we have more inventory. Median sales price down about 2.5%. But last month, that was only about 0.5%. So what's happening is that we're seeing a little more price softening now than we saw this time last year in June, and that's making that median sales price drop a little bit more. Active history, we're sitting about 14,600 listings. We have not had that many on the market since 2010 when we had about 1,000 less. So we've got a lot of inventory out there. Pendings to 2,700. And again, we haven't had a 2 on here since 2012. So we're lowest number of sales, highest level of inventory. So that gives you an idea of the speed of the market. So this is active versus sold listings. Green is active. Blue is closed sales. And again, here we are. You can see that drop off right down here, May to June, the number of closed sales, but we're also maybe seeing the crest of inventory as well. So we had the spring, everybody tries to get out there and sell their home. A certain number of buyers buy, but the ones that don't sell either are going to stay on the market longer, or some of those sellers will retreat, take their home off the market, maybe wait for a different window or a different story in the market to relist that property. But we're seeing if we're peaking on that inventory. You don't typically have as many sellers trying to sell in the second half of the summer. And on top of that, you get some of those spring listings closed, and that starts to peak off on the inventory. So we'll be watching that. I would not look much at the July data yet because we've only had 1 week of July so far. If I come over here, this is sales price trend, and I have to ask you to ignore the final bar here on the right because that is July, and we just don't have enough July sales to really give us a true picture. But if we go all the way back to August, this is the end of last summer, the median sales price was $459. It softened throughout the winter. We got to a low of $419 by the time we got to November. You get a little December bounce, those end of the year buyers. And then January, we started the year at $425. We've seen an increase. So the median home price went from $425 to $455 through April. And then, of course, rates went up. And I'll show that chart to you in a minute, but rates went up. We also had more inventory, which means sellers have to compete harder to get that buyer. And since then, prices have started to soften a little bit. So we went from $455, we got to May $454, and now in June $450. Not a huge drop, but we are seeing, I think maybe that we might peak the year around $455. And between now and December, we'll see that softening kind of come back into the market. That is very normal, happens every year. The only thing that can change that story is either going to be a noticeable softening in mortgage rates without it affecting the economy. And so that could spur buyers into the market if they are excited about low interest rates. Speaking of, let's look at interest rates as of this morning, and this number will change around midday, but for right now, we're just above 7% on the 30-year fixed rate. And typically that means if you are a well-qualified buyer, you've got great credit score, you're probably not in a 7. You're probably in the 6s, somewhere on your interest rate. And of course, if you go with a lower year product or a VA or an FHA, you're also going to be in the 6s. One of the main reasons is we had the jobs report came in last week. That was a little softer than expected. And of course, that's what the Fed and the economy wants to see to soften kind of the premium on those bonds and on mortgage rates. So if that, we don't want it to be too negative, but if the news comes in and the economy is a little softer than they thought, that's typically what is going to bring interest rates down. If I come all the way down to the chart, this looks at all of 2024 from January, and you can see we started the year at 6.7. So that was actually one of our lowest rates of the year. So we started the year hot because we were below 7%, and that was coming off 8% last October. And so rates had really come down hard to start the year, and that spurred a lot of activity. We had some really strong sales early in the year, but then we got above 7. We didn't really jump over it until we got to April. And April's really kind of slammed the brakes on the market here. We got up to 7.5. We kind of stayed up there for a while. We've had a few economic stories that have helped brought it back down, but we've stayed at or above 7% since April 1st. So now we're in month 4 of being at or above 7%. So until that number really kind of shows us that it wants to stay under 7%, I think it's going to continue to keep sales a little slower than normal. So if you are a seller right now, the good news is we've probably peaked out on inventory. I do expect that sales will be a little slow. If you've been driving around town this week or last week, there's like nobody around. And so you can tell people are on vacation. It's summer. There's not as much energy in the market. That's pretty typical for mid to late summer. So I expect July and August to be a little slower. But I do think we usually see people come back to the market. You do have some fall activity, but I don't think sales are going to pick up unless interest rates really come down. So I expect we're going to see kind of the normal bell curve of the year, and be prepared for that. I would price accordingly. If you're a buyer, again, we're at peak inventory. It's going to start to get a little smaller as we get through the rest of the year. So if you're anticipating you want to buy in the next 3 to 6 months, I'd probably start hunting now to see what's out there just to make sure you've got your eye on everything in the market. Hope this was helpful. If you want to follow each and every one of our videos, you can go to our YouTube channel at Ryan Kelly Group. Make sure to click that subscribe button. We're getting close to 100 subscribers, and I plan to blow that out of the water sometime soon, but you can be one of the first to follow them there. And of course, if you know anybody looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate, this is a great time. We'd love the opportunity to talk with them and visit more. Anyways, we got very lucky here in Austin. The Hurricane Beryl kind of pushed east and is blowing through Houston and Galveston right now, so think about them. But as for Austin, just a little windy, nothing major this week. Should be bright and sunny as we get through the remainder of the week. Anyways, you guys have a great one, and we'll talk to you next Monday. Thanks.